Hello and welcome to another edition of the Sustainable Scoop. My name is Matthew Capuano-Rizzo. I'm a student in the Double BA program between Sciences Po in France and Columbia University in the United States. My guest today is Aziz Abu Sarah, an activist, writer, and co-founder of the world tour company Mejdi Tours, which showcases an innovative approach to tourism that opens the eyes and minds of skeptics, tearing down walls and planting seeds of peace, one human experience at a time. Thank you, Aziz, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. Thank you, Matthew, and I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too. So my first question is just a general intro question. Would you be able to introduce yourself and explain how you started Mejdi Tours and how you came to see it as part of the solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Absolutely. So I come from a conflict resolution background. I've worked in conflict resolution in, right now, I think about 60 countries around the world.
Wow.
And while working with Scott, the guy who I founded this company with, Mejdi Tours with, we realized as we worked in places like Afghanistan and like Syria and like all these spots that are heavy conflict areas, that what we do is really connect people. And we thought if we can connect people in these places, people who are enemies, how can we grow this to become more sustainable? How can we make it in a way that actually can function much better and reach more people? And I have a little bit of background in travel, so we decided to start a travel company, and we decided to start our first destination to be Israel and Palestine in Jerusalem because of our backgrounds. I'm Palestinian, he's Jewish, he's been to Israel a few times, and we have a lot of connections there, and we care deeply about that region, and specifically Israel and Palestine. And we thought one of the problems in travel is that people normally get to hear a part of the story. So we decided instead of having one tour guide, we would have two tour guides for every trip. One Israeli, one Palestinian, working together throughout the trip, giving the different views about history, archaeology, music, culture, literature, whatever it is, and have the groups meet people who will tell their stories as well.
My second question is about the recent protests that have erupted around the world. What started with the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis has become kind of a worldwide cry against racism. We've seen protests in the UK, we've seen protests in France, we've seen protests in South Africa, in Tunisia, in Brazil, in Kenya, all around the world. And so I was wondering if you could delve into your experiences with the Israeli police and how that has shaped your activist, political, and professional efforts.
I think it's something that worldwide we have to rethink about the role of law enforcement and what they can and cannot do, and how much there is community relationship with policing. I grew up terrified of police. You know, it's very interesting being in Northern Virginia. I'm privileged. I never had problems with the police, but I didn't come from that. In Jerusalem, I got shot at first time from police when I was a kid, under 10 years old. I was 8 years old, I think, first time I got shot at. My school was raided by the police all the time. I had to take with me an onion to school because I was afraid of tear gas, and I would cut the onion to put it close to my nose. Actually, my mom, I told my mom once, I don't want to go to school anymore, and she's like, you're 8, you can't decide that. I said, well, it's not worth dying for school, is it? So that has shaped a lot of my fear. And then I came here and I didn't have that experience, but I understood now I'm the privileged one, and it doesn't mean that others don't have that experience. And I think that's a problem often. If we are in a place of privilege, sometimes we do not understand that there are many others who have a different experience, and empathy and compassion is about us understanding and feeling with those who have a different experience. And in some ways this is at the heart of my work, is how can we get people to have more empathy and more compassion so we can come to a solution.
And I was wondering how you have taken the courses that you teach at George Mason University in conflict resolution, how you've taken those ideas into your tour company.
So just to clarify, I left George Mason a few years ago, but I'm very grateful for my time there and being with some of the world's best experts on conflict resolution. I think many of these kids you're talking about, 18 years old, they finish high school and they're given a gun and told, protect your country. I can totally, I mean, I know some of them, I meet them, I've been to their classes to talk to them about conflict resolution. It's very hard when you're 18 and given that responsibility. You don't know what to do and you are likely to end up doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So I see them in some ways as victims, just like the Palestinians are. We are all victims of the conflict, of the occupation, of the current reality.
Yeah.
But something that is really important for us to do is understand that conflict resolution is not something only somebody who studied for many years in a university should do. It's something that needs to be in every class from first grade. It's a way of life. How do you deal with bullying? How do you deal with a disagreement? How do you deal? This is stuff that we don't do enough, and it's not in classroom. It's not what teachers often are equipped to even bring into topics, how to discuss it, how do you solve conflict. And that's really what we try to do in our company, is make conflict resolution, peace building a mainstream thing. In our tours you still have fun, you still go to the beach, you still see archaeology and history and all the fun things you can imagine. But at the same time, we understand that that's not enough. If you're traveling somewhere, like Israel and Palestine, so many of the travelers never know anything about the conflict. They go, they see all the holy sites, and they leave. 90% of travelers. And so what we do is we say, hey, if you're coming to this region, learn about what Israelis go through, learn about what Palestinians go through, learn about the conflict, and learn about how we're dealing with it. Because the same issues, in some way or another, exist in other places.
But I was wondering, what is your and your team's secret to getting access to all of these off-limits sites?
Can't tell you the secret.
Okay.
No, I think what I understood is every place, like everywhere in the world, you get some people who are connected and so on. So everywhere I go, instead of going and just trying myself to build it, I find who's the right person to partner with there. And that's back into your question earlier about how do you get locals and not just big companies. I go to locals. So I'll give you an example. When we started working in Bosnia, I didn't know anything in Bosnia. I read about it. I studied about the conflict, all of that. I don't know much about Bosnia to plan a trip. You can look online and copy all the sites. That's easy. But then I called my friend Zia Gafic. Zia is one of the best photojournalists in the world. He's from Sarajevo. His family been there forever. And that's where the difference is. I didn't go to a tourism professional. I went to somebody who knows the country well. And together we ended up building a trip that had sites, history, all of that. But also it had former generals who fought in the war. It had Serbians and Bosnians and Croatians. It had stories. We met with Sufi Muslims. We went to a Sufi service, which normally is not open for tourists, and we were welcomed by the community because we didn't come in, hey, we're the tourists who are coming here and we're going to do whatever we want. We went in as guests. And we went in as friends of friends. And that's how we do our tours everywhere. It's all dependent on our local contacts. And because I've worked in many places in conflict resolution, I'm lucky, both me and my business partner, Scott, we're both lucky to have many of those kind of connections, journalists, writers, photographers, people who work in conflict resolution. And we call them when we want to start a new destination and say, help us. Can you imagine traveling through the former Yugoslavia with a Serbian and a Bosnian telling their stories, what was going on, them growing up through the war. And they both journalists, photojournalists who've documented that issues there, but also other wars around the world. It's just incredible to travel with them, and I'm very grateful for that kind of experience. So it's not only Israel and Palestine. You know, one of the things, I was once in an accelerator for startups, and one of the guys there told me that our company is a failure because, yeah, it works in Israel and Palestine, there's conflict there, but the rest of the world,
no conflict.
What are you talking? And he was English, and he said, like, England, we got nothing. We
but
good.
like they started everything. I mean, like, I don't know, like they
what
tried
do you
to
mean
colonize
the
world.
UK
I
got
mean,
nothing? I mean, you have Northern Ireland, that's Catholic Protestant, that's part of the UK, right?
Yeah.
You have people sleeping in the streets, homelessness in London, just walk around and see. You don't think you have more narratives than just Big Ben and the museum, the British Museum, which, talking about narratives, everything in the British Museum comes from other countries where you've been colonizing. And it's those stories, it's not only in Israel and Palestine. The idea of multiple narratives exists everywhere in the world. And exists here in Northern Virginia. You know, you have Asians here, you have African Americans, you have Middle Easterners, you have white people, you have people from all over, so many immigrants into here. And when I went to Vietnam, I remember thinking, I'm going thousands of miles away to learn about Vietnam, but the truth is, there are big Vietnamese community here. Why am I not connecting with my Vietnamese community here before I even travel to Vietnam? And now I have a friend here who's Vietnamese, and it's amazing to run stuff with him and talk about those issues because I love that culture a lot, and I've been to Vietnam a few times. But we can do that everywhere. There's so many stories we don't explore here at home.
So on your new US tour package, you have tours that explore the past and present civil rights movement, Native American communities, activism, conservation, sustainability, and so much more. And so I was wondering if you could delve into a couple of those packages, explain like what led you to create them, and what do you think people will like about them, and what are you hoping that those tours achieve?
I think travel is not about distance. It's about our state of mind. It's about exploration of something new. And we often think about how far can I go, and don't realize the United States have a lot we haven't explored ourselves. A lot of stories, a lot of history, a lot of beautiful places as well. And so I wanted to have our travelers have the chance to do that. And I started looking, are there companies who are doing this? And not really. There are very few who go into it, and usually they focus on one of those, and that's it. And so I started calling my expert friends who are working with these communities and asking if I can get some help being introduced to these communities. And I asked those communities, how can we run a trip where we still respect whatever privacy you want to have, whatever rules you want to have. That's really important. We're not coming here to watch you and take photos of you. Whenever our cameras have to be put aside, we will put it aside. And two that to me are really important is the civil rights and the Native Americans that you mentioned, because every American should know the history of the civil rights. Every American should understand not just the history in the good and the bad and the protests and how Martin Luther King led the marches and eventually brought the change of the civil rights, and then how he was murdered, but also the culture. You can't only see that community, the African American community, as the victims. You also have to appreciate the culture, the blues music. I was interviewing somebody for our live stream a couple days ago, Daryl Davis, who's an unbelievable musician. And so you have to appreciate the food, the music, the culture that comes with it, so you can see them as a human beings. And the same thing with the Native American community, which is often forgotten. And there's not one Native American community. There are different ones and different ways they dealt with the issues. There are different tribes, and each one had a different relationship with the U.S. government, and each agreement was very different, and their financial situation is different from one tribe to another. And so I want people to understand this. We generalize too much, and this is a chance for us to actually truly explore. You can have fun, like going through Arizona and meeting the different tribes there, but also exploring the beauty of that region with the people who live there.
Yeah.
And that would be just incredible. You'll have a whole new sense of loving the nature, caring about conservation, understanding the importance of the communities who live there, and not think about them as something abstract far away.
So my next question is about tourism and big business. On your website, you talk about how tourism can be something that benefits big business like Marriott, Carnival, often at the expense of local communities. And the whole point of Mejdi, it seems from what I've read on your website, is to benefit local communities, but not just benefit them, but also have the tourists who come interact with those local communities and build long-lasting friendships. And so I was wondering if you have some examples of how that has worked and like stories that inspire you from your work.
Absolutely. Look, tourism employs 10% of the world population working force, which means it's incredibly important for the world economy. But where does the profit go? Does it go to the communities or does it go to big companies? And it's not just the big name companies we know, it's also that tour agencies, just like my tour agency, how much of the money you pay for a tour stays in that company and how much of it really goes to help the local community. It's a question every traveler should ask themselves before booking a tour. How am I helping the locals where I'm going? So how does that work? I think you build relationship with locals, you employ them, you make them part of the business, you have them start their own businesses, you have them guiding, you have them hosting people. So an example would be in Bethlehem, for example, we work a lot with families there where when we go, we have some of our travelers who are willing to do it, spend a night at a family's home or 2 nights. And and then the same amount of money we would have paid for a hotel, we pay for those families.
That's
and
great.
in this way, you are bringing more money to these families. It's not their full-time business. It's once in a while, but it's an additional business that makes a difference. In the old city, we started working with families to host lunches and have a conversation with our travelers. So we go to this pastor who's an Armenian Christian in the old city in Jerusalem, as an example, and they feed us Armenian, Palestinian mix of food, but they also talk to the group about what does it mean to be an Armenian in Jerusalem, a Palestinian Armenian. What is that, being a Christian in Jerusalem? So these ways you are supporting financially the locals, but you're also bringing stories that the travelers would not have heard otherwise.
And so I was wondering how Mejdi Tours approaches monuments, given that you try really hard to show all sides of history.
Yeah, this is an important question. I think what we try to do is show the perception of people. And if a city, if a country decides to honor somebody like Leopold, who I've been in Belgium and I was sick to my stomach that it exists, then this is important to talk about. I don't endorse it in any way, but it's important to talk about that this is where that country is. This is where that government is. And it's, to me, it's mind-boggling that we still allow those kind of figures to be celebrated. I understand them maybe in a museum. I understand it in that setting to talk about history, but I have a hard time when it's in a public sphere. And so our conversation goes about, why is this here? Talk about that. You can't escape it. If you're traveling across the United States, you cannot escape that. Now, for somebody like me coming from the Middle East, you have to understand American culture has affected people everywhere in the world. And so this conversation of what's happening here is happening everywhere in the world because of that.
Okay, so since we are on the Sustainable Scoop, we are a bit interested, just a little bit, on climate change. And so I was wondering if you could go into sustainable travel, how Mejdi Tours approaches that, and kind of what you would like to see in the world of tourism in terms of sustainable travel.
Obviously, travel adds to greenhouse
gas emissions.
And that's bad. So I don't advocate for increasing travel. I advocate for responsible travel. And I quote Stephen Hawking before he died. He was asked about the greatest threat to humanity. And he said the greatest threat is human aggression. And I see travel done right as a solution to that. Now, with that being said, I think we need to change the way we travel. We need to change where we go. I think we have to rethink our cruise travel. Cruises in Barcelona has caused that port to be one of the most polluted in Europe.
Yeah.
So is the cruise travel the way it's done today right? I think there needs to be a real hard questions at how it's done. We can do travel more responsibly. We try to encourage our travelers wherever to go to care about the place, not just, if you care about the people there, you will also care about the environment of where these people live. You will care about the quality of water they will drink. You will care about how global warming is affecting them, and you will be much more responsible. If you don't care about the people, there is no way you will care about the environment. So I still think travel is important. We just have to think more about how we do it, not if we do it at all or not. There needs to be always some kind of red lines of, is tourism helping locals where I'm traveling, or is it hurting them? And if the question it's hurting them, then I shouldn't be doing it.
So you believe that travelers should come away with long-lasting experiences, long-lasting relationships, and not just like an Instagram photo?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I love photography. If you go to my Instagram, I spend hours to take a one shot. And so it's nothing against photography, but your trip can't be only about a photo op. It has to have something more real to it. Peru, I can think about Machu Picchu, where I spent a lot of time trying to get the perfect photo, but that's not my highlight. My highlight was going to a village and meeting with a little girl, and she took me, literally a 5-year-old girl, just took me to visit different homes for half an hour, whatever, going with her and getting in and drinking, tea with them, and that's what really stays with you. And so that's what we try to replicate on our trips. And I brought once a group, interfaith group from Michigan, and when they left back to the States, they started a relationship with the farmers. They stayed with farmers, and they started helping those farmers sell their olive oil, fair trade kind of olive oil here in the United States.
Wow.
And my last trip, I brought the travelers to a school. And out of that meeting, one of the students is getting a scholarship to an American school that's being facilitated through one of the travelers. But if you travel to a place and leave without even a story to tell, you haven't really been there. It doesn't count.
So what are the typical patrons who book with Mejdi Tours? Is there a typical guest, or it's just everyone?
We get everything. We do college students, high school student trips. We do high-end trips. We work with people who are more on the liberal side, people who are more on the conservative side, and that makes me happy. And partially I think we're able to do that because we say very clearly, this is not a propaganda trip. I'm not selling you what I believe. I will get you to meet people who I disagree with completely in every country. I have strong opinions, but this is not about what do I want you to learn. All I want you to do is come out with a full experience, to truly explore the places you can go to, you can visit, or you are visiting. And that attracts a lot of people from all different political sides, ages. We work a lot with universities who want to do a study abroad programs, for example, where we able to offer educational value in our trips that many other companies do not do, because booking the hotel and booking your flight, that's the easy part. Helping you get the connections and the relationships where you're traveling, not every company can do that.
So what can young people do when they're traveling with their families, when we ever get to travel again, to have a global impact, to make sure that they're respectful to communities, to make sure that they learn all of the different perspectives and interpretations of history? Do you have any advice?
Oh, absolutely. I think the first one, I would say we have become too reliant on our cell phones and our GPS and our, and we look, even when we travel, we look so much down instead of up. And I would say one of the main things to do, turn off your phone more often, especially when you're out and see the place, observe. because that's what's going to make you connect to the places you're going to. Don't just check on the phone. Don't always look for another photo, and another Instagram story and another live whatever. Really be in the place and in the moment. There's a time for everything. Yes, get your photos, but don't only do that. Really be in it. The second is ask a lot of questions, and you don't always have to go way out of your way. Sometimes a conversation with the waiter at the restaurant or at the hotel, or just talk to people and talk to them like normal human being. Doesn't matter which job they have, and ask them about their lives, ask them about the areas they are, ask them what food they prefer, which restaurant they would like to, what they would want you to see in their country. Tell them, I don't want to see the most famous thing. What would you want me to see? And that sometimes saves you a lot of hassle. In Bali, everybody goes to see this thing called Gate of Heaven. It's a very famous photo with the reflective pool. It's not real reflective pool. It's basically a piece of mirror it's a trick, photography trick. And people spend 5 to 6 hours to get it. Between driving, waiting online, and you waste a full day of your trip just to get one photo. And I was talking to a driver, and I said, everybody goes there, but I'm like, I don't want to spend hours to go there. What do you think? And he said, yeah, it's really dumb, because you could do the same kind of photo just down the street here. There's another temple, but nobody ever asks, so we don't tell them. And it's a nice drive, we get paid more. So I'm like, well, take me to this one then. And 5 minutes later, we at this place, we get the photo, literally the same kind of shot. And nobody could tell the difference. And that's what happens when you talk to people.
And so how can young people learn more about your work, learn more about conflict resolution, and frankly learn more about the world?
Well, I have a new book coming out literally these days.
Oh, great.
And it's called Crossing Boundaries, A Traveler's Guide to World Peace. And in that book I put in my ideas about travel, but it's not really about where to travel. I don't tell you should go to China and you should go to Jerusalem. I don't like actually those kind of articles that gives you the top 10 places to go to, because it just messes up tourism altogether. Instead, I talk about how to travel, and not just how to travel abroad, how to travel with our friends, how to travel in our own neighborhood, really how to interact with people. And I talk about conflict resolution. I talk about how to meet people as you are traveling. There are different ways to do that. I talk about volunteering, is it good or bad? I talk about conflict resolution in the sense of cultural elements. Each country has different understanding of how to solve conflicts that based on their culture, and I talk about that as well. Talk about responsible travel, what does it mean? So all these topics are in the book, and I promise it's a good book to read.
Great. So thank you, Aziz, for taking the time to talk with me today. I know that I learned a lot, and I really admire all that you're doing to tackle world peace, because normally we always say world peace is one of those unachievable goals, and we're like, maybe one day we'll have world peace. But the fact that there's someone like you out there who's really in the doing the work to achieve world peace all around the world is really inspiring. And so thank you again for talking with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for all the thoughtful questions and comments, and for you caring about this topic. You know, I think the fact that you care at this age, at 19, being so into it and being willing to go out of your way to learn more about it, that's our hope, to make a change.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to thank Aziz for taking the time to speak with us today. I think we all learned a lot about his inspiring work. And lastly, just make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. You can share this video if it inspired you like it inspired me. Thank you for tuning in.